Welcome back to Banging the Can, the Houston sports show that does not apologize for championship rings and tings, presented by Bolen Media. I am Ross Bolen, and the streak of 7 straight American League Championship Series appearances is over for your Houston Astros. 2 World Series championships, 4 pennants, 7 straight full season division titles. A truly mind-blowing run. The last time the Astros didn't make the ALCS, Barack Obama was president of the United States. The newest iPhone was the iPhone 7. The Denver Broncos were reigning Super Bowl champions. Taylor Swift's latest album was 1989. Aaron Judge was a rookie. I weighed 60 pounds more than I do now and was still drinking, blacking out at least once a week. It is truly insane how many years in a row they were one of the best 4 teams in baseball. I've had non-Astros fan friends of mine reaching out to me to check on me today like I lost a member of my family. Ironically, I canceled my therapy session for this afternoon because I thought for sure we would be playing again, and now I need therapy more than ever, so we'll just have to grieve together on the show. What a ride. What a ride. But is it over? I'll get to that. First, let's talk about what happened in the wild card series against the Tigers. Game 1, offense was obviously the issue. All right? Framber Valdez did not have his best stuff. But when it came down to it, defense and preventing runs wasn't the big problem. Scoring runs was the big problem. So many bad at-bats against Skubal. And, obviously the strategy going in was to try to attack his pitches early in the count, and it really didn't pan out. We had the 5-pitch first inning. He was able to keep his pitch count insanely low throughout the game. And, frankly, there's a reason he was arguably the best pitcher in baseball all season long. He has nasty stuff. He is not easy to hit. Crazy fastball, incredible changeup to work off of it. It was just, that was that. And frankly, this is why you want a top 2 seed. So you can avoid the 3-game wildcard series where anything can happen. And it's all about who is the hotter team. And the Tigers were the hottest team in baseball rolling into the postseason. And we knew for that reason this was a huge risk. It was not the matchup we wanted. And frankly, we didn't want to be in this 3-game series in the first place, but that's the way it shook out. And you lose game 1 because they've just got a better pitcher. That was the big story. Guys were not able to get the bat on the ball. And then game 2, really it was closing pitching. We had better at-bats. We were able to generate some runs, got more runners on base and in scoring position. It still wasn't the greatest offensive game of the season by any means, but when it came down to it, we ended the season in the exact same way we started it. When we were losing all those games in the first couple months of the season, which is what ended up kind of screwing us and preventing us from getting a top 2 seed in the American League, it was usually because the 3-headed combination of Brian Abreu and Ryan Presley and Josh Hader wasn't working out the way we thought it would, and we kept blowing leads in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings of baseball games. And I mean, you had Josh Hader out there in game 1 in the Tigers series, and then he comes back out in game 2, and you're kind of just like gritting your teeth like, oh my God, this guy has done a lot of work in a 48-hour period, and you're asking him to go multiple innings, and that happened I think 7 times this year, which is not really something he's accustomed to, and it just backfired horribly at the worst possible time. And yeah, partially, you do have to tip your cap to the Tigers. I know people don't like to hear that, but you do. I mean, Josh Hader alone got paid $19 million this season. The entire Detroit Tigers roster made less money combined than Josh Hader did this year. So they just wanted it more, and they were better prepared, and maybe they were better coached, but they were certainly hotter at the right time, and bam, boom, game 1, game 2, and that's that season over. You know, it happened so fast. I think that's part of the reason it's been kind of difficult for a lot of fans to digest, and There was a lot of commentary during those two games about how Minute Maid Park was like half empty for the first several innings, which is part of the problem with having these 1:32 p.m. Central Time games. Like, people have jobs. It's the middle of the week. On top of that, yes, our fan base is very spoiled. We're very accustomed to going deeper into the playoffs, so people didn't feel the pressure of getting into the stadium and getting loud and getting proud. And that's part of the territory. I mean, it's not good. It's not excusable. It's a thing that I think our fan base will learn to cherish more moving forward. Now that we've seen what happens, you can get knocked. It turns out you can lose before the ALCS. So there was a lot of different factors here, and it was not a fun series to watch. And it was over just like that. But God, I mean, one of the spots that was clearly disappointing, again in the postseason, Kyle Tucker. I mean, what the fuck, dude? I mean, it's like in game 2, he had a couple of chances, a couple of big at-bats to make a difference, get the offense started, drive some runs in, and he looked awful. He just doesn't look locked in, and he didn't look locked in last postseason. It's been very confusing to see Kyle Tucker look as good as he did during the first few months of this year, where he was a clear-cut MVP candidate. He gets hurt. He comes back right before the postseason. He seems to have his shit together again, and then bam, the postseason hits, and Kyle Tucker is really unable to produce anything of note. So you gotta I saw a Chandler Rome tweet that said Kyle Tucker was 6 for his past 46 at-bats in the postseason. That is simply not good enough. And another argument I saw was that Dana Brown is going to crush him in arbitration as a result. We'll see how that goes. But there was a couple of big spots, a couple of guys that we expect to be that guy in this situation that just were not. And Kyle Tucker was one of them. Josh Hader was one of them. And the back half of the batting order in general during these two games against the Tigers was not great. There were a couple of times they came through, but really, you got through the meat of the order. And then if you're pitching, you got to feel pretty good about facing our bottom 4 hitters. I mean, Pena didn't do a whole lot. Chaz was, had just come back from injury. Jake Myers is sort of an easy matchup if you're a pitcher at this point. It was tough back there, man. I mean, we didn't get a lot of production out of the back of our lineup, and all in all, there's not a lot to discuss in terms of the wild card loss to the Tigers because it's pretty straightforward. Game 1, Skubal dominates. Game 2, the bullpen that you thought you built exactly for this situation fails you. And it sucks. It sucks hard. But it is what it is. So what now? What happens now? I'll tell you this, Dana Brown has his hands full, as everybody knows, because this is not a cheap team. There's a lot of money being spent here. I think we're top 5 in spending in the league now. A lot of hard decisions are going to have to be made here. Do they panic and start a rebuild like a lot of Astros fans were suggesting immediately after Game 2, after the loss? That would be an insanely quick trigger finger. And frankly, I would put the odds of that happening at close to 0%. And if you're one of these fans who's saying, burn it all down, it's time to start over, don't delay the inevitable, I don't think you're being very logical. I think you're letting your emotions get the best of you, and perhaps this near decade of dominance has skewed your judgment, because that is just fucking... I'm going to explain why that's crazy. That's crazy talk that doesn't need to be occurring at all. Some other questions. Do they find a way to get Bregman back? Right? Do they build around Altuve and Bregman and Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez by making some trades? Now, this is just talking about 2025. Because after 2025, as I'll get to, we've got even more free agency decisions to make. But really this year, the biggest one is Alex Bregman, obviously. And if you look at that on paper, Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, having all of those guys back, and then you make some moves, right? Then, yeah, you can be a contender. Do you bring back Kikuchi? He was fantastic. Do you trade Framber to find a first baseman? I think that's a legitimate question to consider at this point. They're going to have to get creative. They're going to have to do some things. Now, Dana Brown's press conference this morning kind of alluded to the fact that he doesn't look at first base as like some big problem area. I think he said, we were able to win as much as we were with Yuli Gurriel at first base, which almost felt like a knock on Yuli, but a lot of questions that'll be answered this offseason. It's going to be a huge and very interesting offseason, but I think there, like I said, almost no chance in hell that they decide, screw it, we're out, it's time to start over, let's take this thing from the top, and they just tear it all down. I really, really don't think it's going to happen. There's too much talent on this team still, and the division is still too wide open, as we saw again this season. We had a bad year. This was a bad year. This was, as Justin Verlander said, the hardest year since he has been here, since 2017, since 2016, really. This was the most challenging year. A lot went wrong, and yet they were still able to get to the postseason. They were still able to win the division. And no, things didn't go well in the postseason. The wild card series was pretty embarrassing. I mean, it showed you where all the improvements need to be made. This was also the first year for Joe Espada as our manager. I think he will get better. I think he was extremely rattled by the first couple months of the season. He was able to band together with the team, pull the guys together, keep their heads on straight, and get us back on a path to the postseason. So that was an impressive turnaround. From 7-19 and 12-24, those are terrible records. I think we were the first team in 100 years or some shit to make the postseason with that bad of a start. So for that, we should be proud of the Astros. But if you watched this whole season like I did, if you were as tuned into this team as I was, then you had some sort of an idea that we weren't exactly in a position to be winning another World Series. It was going to be tough. We were going to need everybody to catch fire at the same time. And they looked pretty lifeless out there. I think Skubal in the first game really took the life out of the Astros. They just didn't have any answer there. And then when your back's against the wall in game 2, anything can happen. As I've said repeatedly, the wild card series, man, it's a dangerous thing. You're seeing a lot of teams that have been knocked out, Braves fans, Astros fans, saying these 3-game series are bullshit. They need to make it at least 5. And I don't necessarily disagree, but this is also what you have to know going in. This is why you try to get a top 2 seed, because you can avoid this entirely, like the Guardians did, like the Yankees did, right? So, free agents right now: Alex Bregman, Justin Verlander, Yusei Kikuchi. That's the top tier. That's the first tier. I would really put Bregman in a tier by himself, but I don't know what will happen. We all know who Bregman's agent is. We all know how Jim Crane operates. If you look at history, I think it tells you as an Astros fan that there's a good chance we don't bring Bregman back. But if you look at some of the things that are being said by Alex Bregman, by Jose Altuve, by Dana Brown, it gives me some hope that maybe this will be a thing that happens. Bregman has made a lot of money in his career, and he's going to make a lot more money even if he signs here. I don't know how far Jim Crane will be willing to go, but I do know that that's a huge hole at third base you are suddenly looking at if he is gone. Justin Verlander, I think he's probably, I mean this with all due respect, love JV, but I think he's probably a bit washed to be bringing him back into this situation, because what we need is a little bit of new blood, new energy, new life, some fresh faces. I think there's some truth to that. Also, our pitching rotation is insanely stacked, which I will talk about later in the show. So JV, I think he has to go, just to be brutally honest. I think that was it. I know he wants to pitch more. He thinks he has more to offer. I know the last few starts of the season after he came back early from injury were not representative of what he can contribute, but I also just don't think we really need him. I think Hunter Brown has taken the step. I think we're good. Thank him for his service. He's a legend in Houston forever. I hope he goes into the Hall in an Astros jersey. But I think that was probably it for him here. You say Kikuchi, I think you try to bring him back. Other free agents, Hector Neris, Jason Hayward, who was here for a cup of coffee, Caleb Ferguson, relief pitcher, Kendall Graveman, another relief pitcher, Ben Gamel, outfielder. So they've got some guys that are going to be out the door that we will not see again. If last year was any indicator, I don't think there's a good chance that we re-sign many of those last 4 names I said, or 5 names rather. Now, this is where things get interesting. After next season, so we have an entire season, And then after 2025, Kyle Tucker is a free agent. Framber Valdez is a free agent. Ryan Presley is a free agent. Jose Urquidy, who is still recovering from injury, is a free agent. That's where things get curious to me. Because if you're looking at the way this season went, like Framber Valdez, still an ace, yes. But in the postseason, his last 5 or 6 starts now, things have not gone well. He still has issues with locking in and focusing and maintaining his head. As people say, he's a bit of a head case. We've seen him at his best, and when he's at his best, he's pretty much unhittable. But he hasn't been close to at his best in a single postseason game we have watched in more than a couple of years now. Do you use, because the starting lineups, the rotation is so stacked at this point, especially if you bring back Kikuchi, do you use Framber Valdez as a trade chip to go and get another difference maker for your defense and for your offense because you don't need as many pitchers as we have? That's a question. I would not be totally against it. It might be it's entirely possible that if you ask Dana Brown, is there any chance you trade Framber Valdez? He says, get the fuck out. Don't ever ask me another question. You're an idiot. That's entirely possible. But from where I'm sitting and from what I've been watching, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that because there's so much value there. I think, like I said, Framber is very, very good. And maybe if he gets into a fresh place with a fresh start, then he can lock in the postseason or whatever. But all I'm saying is, I don't know that what he's been able to do in the regular season outweighs the issues he has had in the postseason. And again, I'm not trying to put Game 1 on Framber. I don't think Game 1 was on Framber. What did he give up? 3 runs? You're going to need to score more than 3 runs to win in the playoffs. Everybody knows that. So it's not necessarily on him, but it's the way he pitched during that performance, where like he couldn't get a breaking ball over the plate to save his life. You could just tell he didn't have any of his stuff. It was a disaster in terms of his performance, in terms of like fundamentally what he was able to bring to the mound. So that is an area of opportunity from my very amateur perspective, my amateur couch general manager perspective. Framber Valdez, question mark, because he's going to be a free agent after next year. That's why I'm bringing this up. Do you go and get value for him now? Because I really don't think the odds are high that they're going to re-sign him after next season. But with the way this all breaks out free agency-wise, it is possible that Dana Brown and Jim Crane will look at this Astros roster and say, okay, we have one more shot here. Regardless of if Bregman comes back, we have one more shot and it's 2025. And in that sense, they may decide to keep Framber around. It'll depend who's available and what Dana Brown is able to get, in terms of conversations going with other general managers around the league. But I do think Framber Valdez is potentially a huge trade chip. It's just something to consider. The same kind of applies to Kyle Tucker. The fact that he has underperformed as badly as he has over the last couple postseasons, I think it puts him in a similar box as Framber Valdez for all the same reasons I just said. Obviously, Kyle Tucker is one of the best right fielders in baseball, by and large, considered one of the best outfielders and hitters in the game. Like I said, first couple months of the season, he's on a clear-cut MVP path. Things go off the rails when he gets hurt. That was one of the most devastating things that occurred this season in a series of devastating injuries that really cost us the ability to get momentum and get closer up to 90+, closer to 100 wins and getting a top 2 seed. It's like before last year, if you asked me if there was any chance if we traded Kyle Tucker, I would have hated that idea. I don't necessarily hate it anymore because I think what you're looking at here with the Astros is the need for like what we would call a soft reboot. You don't burn it down. You've got your core. You've got enough talent, certainly to win the division, but the goal is a World Series. So do you utilize some of these pieces that have not served you well in the postseason that we know we can get a lot back for in trades? Maybe. I don't know. Ryan Presley, I think he's back next year. I don't think there's any chance we trade him, but he will be a free agent after 2025, which will likely be another really sad goodbye. And Jose Urquidy, still recovering from injury. There's not a lot to talk about with him yet. Talk more about Bregman, though. Couple of things. One, he wore his Astros hat in the post-game press conferences, so he's not like Garrett Cole. I didn't expect him to be like Garrett Cole, but look, Bregman has been here this whole time for the entire run, right? He was there in 2017. He was there now. I hate saying it that way because I don't think the run is over, but the point is he's one of the beating hearts and a big piece of the soul of this team and this franchise at this point. There's a reason Jose Altuve wants him back so badly and sees so much value in him. You don't typically see Jose Altuve saying things about other players that are entering free agency like he said about Alex Bregman yesterday. And here's some quotes per Chandler Rome from Jose Altuve. In my mind, there is not a chance this is his last game. He gave a lot to this organization, so it's time for us as an organization to pay him back and make him stay here. And then someone asked him if he has plans to tell Jim Crane that, and Jose Altuve replied, for sure. So if Altuve, who we know got a new contract and is an Astro for life, is this adamant that Alex Bregman needs to be back in a Houston Astros jersey, and I think a lot of fans feel the same way. When you're looking at the landscape of baseball, like, is there just another third baseman out there you think plugs the hole that can just become as productive? First of all, as good at defense as Alex Bregman is, very unlikely. Offensively, he always starts slow, and then back half of the season, he's a fucking animal, and he did pretty much the same thing this year. I don't think you can replace him very easily. And it's not like with our, AAA talent, we've just got some third baseman waiting in the wings like we did with Correa and Jeremy Pena. More on Pena in a minute, too. But this is why I feel good about it, because the combination of the pressure from the fans, the facts, the stats, looking at the back of Alex Bregman's baseball card, to put it in a way that none of us want to hear, the comments from Jose Altuve, I think there's a legitimate shot that out of all the guys we've seen watch, whether it was Springer or Correa or multiple pitchers that we watched leave over the years, I think there's the best chance out of any of them that we bring back Alex Bregman. And I know that's not saying much in terms of looking backward, but I feel okay about this. He did tweet, "Thank you, Houston." And a lot of people looked at this as like a goodbye. This is the first time he's entered free agency. It's the first time he's been in a position like this. So I did not in any way take him tweeting, "Thank you, Houston," as that was it. It's still very possible, but as he said in the postgame presser, he's going to let his agent, Scott Boras, he who shall not be named, and Dana Brown and the Astros front office handle those negotiations. And I'm sure there is a number that the Astros could offer that is less than he will get elsewhere that he will still accept here. And it's just going to be a matter of if they can get to that number and if Jim Crane is willing to go to that number. And as I've said repeatedly and will get said all offseason, Dana Brown is going to need to get creative. There are going to have to be some other moves they make to try and shave this payroll down a little bit, especially if they want to bring back Bregman. So Alex Bregman deserves all the respect in the world. He has been unbelievable this past 7 years now. 8 years, I guess. And I don't want to see him go. I think it would be a mistake to let him leave. If you're going to try to make one more run at this, if you want to keep that core together, which again, every time I look at it on paper, I'm like, you know what? If we've got Jose Altuve and we've got Yordan Alvarez and we've got Kyle Tucker and we've got Alex Bregman, they should be able to build a winning roster around that again next year. And we could have all of those guys back if they can re-sign Bregman. And then you make some other creative moves and suddenly, really, especially considering how many guys got hurt for us this season, you should be able to come back next year better than you were in 2024. If Dana Brown is as good at his job as he has been billed, that is what will happen. So I'm not down in the dumps about this situation for the Astros. This season, it sucked, man. It was hard, but that's how it goes. Like, you're watching all these teams in the postseason right now, like the Atlanta Braves getting dispatched again, and you're seeing how difficult it is to win, especially in the wild card series when it's 3 games and any fucking thing can happen. It's very, very tough. We've been very, very, very lucky, very, very blessed. This level of sustainability in Major League Baseball is rarely accomplished. It's only been done under a handful of times in the history of the sport, the kind of run that the Astros have had. And yeah, it still hurts that we only got 2 rings out of it because I think we should have gotten at least 1 more. And when you look back at 2023 and losing to the Rangers in the ALCS Game 7 and them going on to win a championship, and then the Rangers and the Diamondbacks, both World Series clubs, failing to even make the playoffs this year, again, not only does it remind you how difficult it is, but it also makes me feel like we should have gotten at least 1 more. And I have to imagine that's the way Jim Crane feels too. This is an owner that we know wants to win. And if he really wants to win, I think he's got at least one more shot before then this window maybe starts to close. But has it started to close yet? No, not in my opinion. It has not. The infield, again, becomes very questionable if you get rid of Bregman. Pena showed some weaknesses this season. Altuve is getting up there in age. First base was a fucking carousel all season long. If you lose your third baseman, who is the cornerstone of your defense in the infield, that, to me, is a problem. There are other questions around the infield, of course. Will Pena improve? We saw what he was able to do in 2022. ALCS and World Series MVP. It's kind of been an up and down roller coaster for Pena since then. I think there was a lot of disappointment around his general performance this season, off and on. I think we all expected him to jump up to the all-star level, and that hasn't happened yet. Will he get better? Who will play first base? Again, a lot of questions that need answering in the offseason. And then there's the outfield, where it was a kind of, I feel like one of the things they should go after this offseason is more stability in their lineup. And in their outfield is one of the areas that's an obvious glaring thing. Between Jake Meyers and Chas McCormick, you're talking about two guys who are good defensively, but bring almost a Martin Maldonado level of a lack of confidence to the plate. They're just not that good at hitting. No pitcher is afraid of either of those dudes. And you're rotating in all these different guys, and Hayward and Dubon and Alvarez when he's out there. And I think they'll have to play it super safe with Yordan Alvarez moving forward in terms of like using him in left field. I don't think that should happen as much. The injuries after the past couple years have started to stack up. I think you have to keep that dude safe and his bat and him healthy, and do that by keeping him in the DH and certainly telling him not to slide and land on his fucking leg like he's some 5'8", 175-pound guy. That's not who he is. He's giant. You can't do that. Got to keep him safe. So questions in the outfield, I think this is another area we could see some changes get made. I think this season, between 2023 and 2024, I think part of Dana Brown's goal and Jim Crane's vision seemed like it was to maintain continuity, because you just came within one game of the World Series again in 2023. So why shake up too much? So I think they wanted to maintain continuity, and that's why you saw this whole situation in the outfield sort of remain the same as it did last year. I don't expect that to be the case next year. If it is, I think it's because they haven't found any way out of it. But they got to find a way out of it, because that situation is just not good enough. It's just not good enough if you want to win a World Series, which, again, is the goal here. We're not some fledgling team talking about how to build back and get into the postseason. We do that every year. We've been there literally every year for 8 fucking years. We were in the postseason again. Remember that. Hold it close to your heart. And don't let any of these shit talkers, and if you're here and you're one of the Rangers or Mariners fans that's hate watching, and you're like, you guys suck now. You didn't even make it to the postseason. If we suck, what does that say about your shit-ass team? So they got to fix up the outfield. I don't want to watch the Jake Meyers and Chas McCormick musical chairs in the outfield again next season. That's my personal opinion. I love both of those guys. The Chaz Chomp will always live on in my heart. I like Jake Meyers a lot, but he's just never been able to bring the consistency at the plate. He was dog shit hitting the back half of the season. And again, just to be clear, I like these guys a lot as human beings, as far as I can know them anyway, through, interviews and following them on social media and whatnot. I'm not shitting on them as humans, but this is a sport. This is the way sports work. You talk about performance, right? It's a business. And even in the mind of a fan like me, it's about performance. It's about who is good enough to get this team wearing that logo to where we want to see them go, which is to obviously hoisting a fucking trophy and getting rings at the end of a season, right? So just putting that in here too. I don't mean any of this personally. It's not personal attacks on any of these guys. It's just that if we're looking at weaknesses and places we could get better, you got to point to the outfield too, because that whole situation has just been sort of a mess for multiple seasons in a row now, and especially with Yordan and Kyle Tucker getting injured. Like, it's just been a mess out there. Dana Brown did a decent job of plugging the holes this year, but I think when you're looking at the offseason, one of the things this team should want to do is not have to plug holes anymore, or not as many anyway. Too much hole plugging going on. We're just too many holes to be plugged this season. And I don't want to watch that again. I don't think I just think that stability and consistency are part of what gets you to greatness, right? And this year, we were not great. There have been multiple years, probably 4 seasons out of this 7, 8 in a row here, that we have watched a great baseball team. This was not one of them. Last year was not one of them. So if you're looking at the window and you're saying, well, we got one more shot, at least we know we have one more shot in 2025, then you got to build for great again. Not for continuity, not for, well, let's not get crazy. It is time to get a little crazy and take some risks. Because this wasn't it. And I think that's part of what led to, if you can call it a performance, the performance from the fans at Minute Maid in this 2-game series against the Tigers. There hasn't felt like a lot of momentum the past 2 seasons. It's been painful and frustrating. And this one in particular, this season with the worst start since like 1958 or whatever the hell it was. I don't remember off the top of my head. But the fact that we made the postseason at all is close to a miracle. Not as miraculous as the Tigers, but close. So, again, I think the front office should be proud of that. There's nothing to hang your head about here, is what I'm trying to say. Fans included. Players included. You took a ton of tough breaks, and you still found a way to fight and give yourself a chance. You didn't take advantage of that chance, but they've got to find a way to get more continuity in terms of the lineup they're able to put on the field every game next season. Too much switching and swapping and injuries and all this shit. It's just like put you in this place where you can't get momentum. And the fans can feel that too, and then there's not as much excitement. You saw a lot of people saying like, well, they have to give them something to cheer about. It's like, brother, most people go their entire lives without their baseball team giving them as much to cheer about as we have had since the year 2017. We should be cheering as loudly and proudly as possible for another decade based on the past 7 years alone. So, but you saw how this last couple years affected the fan base, and I think on top of being spoiled and entitled, which is, I'm not hating on anybody, it's just the way it goes. If you get so used to winning, it's just like, oh, fuck, it's the wild card. Of course we'll beat the Tigers, and you're just like not that locked in. It's the way it goes, and maybe that happened with the players too, which is why I'm saying there's probably a need for some fresh blood here, some fresh meat. Let's talk about pitching next year. Dana Brown this morning said, quote, our rotation is going to be pretty stacked. That's a good place to be. You win with pitching, end quote. That's another reason I'm so confident about this team moving forward. It didn't shake this. It may end up being the blessing that came from the curse of the year 2024, that we have this plethora of pitching. One, Hunter Brown. He looked like that guy yesterday. He looked like he should have started game 1. He was incredible. He had his stuff. He was locked in. He was hitting his spots. All of his pitches were working, and he had the confidence and that swagger on the mound that you want to see from a winning postseason pitcher, which is what I believe Hunter Brown has become, regardless of how the scoreboard ended up at the end of game 2. Hunter Brown is, in my opinion, based on these last 6 months of his pitching and the way he looked in the postseason, a comfortable ace at this point. You can slot him in at 1 or 2, probably 1, and you're good to go. Framber Valdez, big question mark next to him. But at the very least, let's say he's still here. He's still probably your 1 or 2 guy and going to get you a lot of regular season wins. I just don't think you can count on him to be your game 1 starter in the postseason, given what we've seen the last 2 years. That's not saying he's terrible, but as I said earlier in the show, I also think he kind of offers a uniquely valuable potential trade situation. We'll see what happens. I might not even know what I'm talking about there. If you bring back Yusei Kikuchi, you got an easy 1, 2, 3 in terms of 3 starting pitchers you know you can trust in 3 games, which is yet to be determined, but I think they need to bring Kikuchi back if it's on the table and in Jim Crane's pocketbook. Ronel Blanco, huge step forward this season. Finally became that guy. Obviously, the amount of innings he had to pitch in the regular season was not ideal, and in part that was due to a lot of injuries and a lot of different pitchers. But he went into the bullpen for the postseason, looked great in game 1. The way things unfolded, it's such a tough job that Joe Espada has because people like me were questioning, how do you burn Ronel Blanco and Hader in that game one that felt unwinnable as a result of Scooball's performance? Then it actually did end up giving us a chance to come back and win in the bottom of the ninth. So it's hard to say Espada made the wrong choice. But then when I look at game two, you ask yourself, well, if we had Ronel Blanco and a fresher Josh Hader for game two, would we have won? And to me, the answer is probably yes. That's where it gets painful. The bigger picture point, though, is that Ronel Blanco is another stud. Then you've got Spencer Arrighetti, who had down moments, but for the most part, you have any problem with him being your fourth best pitcher, your fifth best pitcher? Absolutely not. Then, if you get Christian Javier back and Luis Garcia, who apparently didn't get an update on Javier or on Garcia, but Javier and Urquidy are both projected to be back at the end of July, according to Dana Brown this morning. He said, hopefully it's earlier, was his quote. Now, you can't count on that, but do you need to? I just read you another, like Hunter Brown, Framber Valdez, Kikuchi, Blanco, Arrighetti, Javier, Luis Garcia, Jose Urquidy. You've just got so much talent in your rotation at this point that you get some middle relief guys, you plug some other holes in terms of your bullpen, and like you're in a great spot pitching-wise, which is the most important thing in the game. It's the most important thing. If you want to win in 2024, in this era of baseball, but really all of them, it's like your quarterback in the NFL, right? As Texans fans, we are more than well aware of how valuable it is to have a good quarterback who can actually win you football games. If you don't have that, you don't have much, brother. And if you don't have pitching in the MLB, you don't have much. We do have pitching, which is why I'm so confident that like if Dana Brown was pitched to us as a guy who could evaluate talent and figure shit out. And if he is that guy, then I think we will still be very good next year, and we should be, as I said already, better than we were this season. So there's a lot to be positive about, especially when you consider the fucking situation with our pitchers. If you can get these guys healthy that aren't, like Luis Garcia and Christian Javier were both animals before they got hurt. Urquidy was solid, not great, but solid. You add that in with all those other names, and man, that's a lot. That's a lot of pitchers, which is, again, why I think there might be an opportunity with some sort of a trade, and maybe Framber Valdez is the best guy to go. I don't know. That's not my problem, thankfully. It's not my job to make that decision. And it's why Dana Brown has his work cut out for him. But pitching-wise, you have to feel good. So is it over? After sleeping on it, like when the game ended, I was down. That was tough, man. Like because look, we're so used to it. And we've watched so many games. When your team is this good for this long, you become so emotionally attached to all the players, and you get to know them and their families, and you follow them on social media and see their kids growing up for 7 fucking years and all this different shit. You see them get married, you see them have kids, and you feel like you know them. And when they lose, it's like you lost, which is stupid on an unbelievable level that I don't have time to get into today from a psychological standpoint. But it is the way sports work, and it's what makes sports so great. And it hurts so bad that it was hard not to feel like, fuck, is it over? Is it over? But after sleeping on it, there's absolutely no reason to panic here. This season was a fucking disaster, injuries-wise. Kyle Tucker was out forever. Jordan jacks up his knee right before the postseason. It was like almost like the exclamation point at the end of this whole fucking sentence from hell. Urquidy goes down. Javier goes down. Garcia doesn't make it back from Tommy John. These recoveries that we thought would occur, Lance McCullers Jr. included, did not actually occur. And it put us in a position where we were in a bad spot. And they still fought and got to the postseason. So, no, you don't hit the panic button. That is a loser mentality. And most of these people you see, and maybe you're one of them watching or listening right now, most of these people you see saying, burn it down, it's time to rebuild. 1, they don't know what they're talking about. And 2, they're not very good fans. It's just truth. You can't be that negative and ignorant and stupid. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. And look at our division, as I have said repeatedly. Our competition in the AL West are not serious people. How many opportunities have we given the Mariners to get better and pass us up? They have the worst fucking offense in baseball this year, even with the best pitching in baseball this year. That's pathetic. The Rangers won a World Series on a fluke 1 year hot run. Couldn't even make the postseason this year. They were, 10 games back when it was all said and done? They look like shit. They are not a problem. This team should easily win the AL West again next season. There's no reason they shouldn't, given the pieces that they have and given that the fact that, frankly, now their starting rotation should be competitive with the Mariners and with the top pitching staffs in baseball. And you've got enough talent on offense. You've got Jose Altuve in the one spot still. He's still pretty damn good if you didn't notice. You should bring back Alex Bregman. You've got Yordan Alvarez, who needs to be healthy and needs to be more protected in terms of the opportunities for him to get hurt. You should have Kyle Tucker again, depending on if some craziness happens with the trade, which I don't think is likely because it's not Jim Crane's style. You have not seen him trade guys before their contracts expire to try to get some value and rebuild the farm system. That's not the way he's operated during this dynastic run. So all of that, you got enough pieces. You're good enough. The division stinks. You just have to build better for a postseason run. And look, this is not something people like to hear, but you go to the ALCS every year for 7 straight seasons, you are wearing your guys out. That's so much extra baseball. It's so much less rest between seasons. This could, again, there could be a blessing within the curse. First part of the blessing, we've discovered a ton of pitching talent that we didn't even realize we had, and gave guys the opportunity to grow as pitchers and step up to the next level and become really, really, really good. Not just playable, really good. And then 2, you're getting the rest finally. You're not pitching or playing deep into October. It hurts, it sucks, but those are the silver linings. And I think they could pay huge dividends in 2025, if not beyond. So we'll see. You reload, though. You reload. That's what you do here. I don't think you'll find a single good baseball mind who tells you there's an argument to be made that the Astros should rebuild. Not one. You may find some slapdick hot take artist saying that, or some ignorant doofus of a fan who didn't start watching baseball until 2018. Those people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. You don't rebuild here. You reload and you go for it again. Dana Brown this morning, per Brian McTaggart, quote, "We're not taking anything off the table in terms of what we would do. In terms of making trades or signing a free agent, the main goals would be to get back to the postseason again and go as deep as we can go and get back to the World Series." That's the quote that gives me some of the insight that I've shared with you today in terms of the possibility of trades and the names that I think make the most sense, because they're valuable names that can bring you back a lot of talent on the other side of things. So this isn't it. That wasn't it. I know a lot of people want us to believe that was it, mostly other ignorant fan bases. It wasn't, though. If you take a few minutes just to remove the emotion of what just occurred in the wild card and how frustrating this season was, and look at this thing objectively on paper, we're still right there. This is what normal teams have to do. Every offseason, they have to go, well, shit, we didn't make it. There's only one team that wins the World Series every year. Everybody else has to look at themselves and go, how do we get better? And even then, frankly, based on what we just saw from the Rangers, winning the World Series doesn't even mean you're that fucking good next year. So, everybody has to look at their team and decide how to get better in the offseason. And we are supposed to be built to handle this in terms of our front office. And Jim Crane has proven time and again as an owner that he wants to win, and he knows how to win, and he knows how to put people in a position to win. Other than that short stint there where he decided him and Jeff Bagwell should pretend to be GM, that was a mistake. And I think he hopefully learned from that, because it did set us back, and it did put us in a tougher spot when it was all said and done. But you have to have a little faith, considering the amount of hardware they have brought home, the amount of pride and joy they have brought this city and this fan base, and how much fun it has been to watch them every single season since I was a fucking completely different person. That's one of the things about this that's so crazy. Just to reflect a little here at the end of today's show. As you look back on this season, really, and this run of ALCS appearances, like, look back with pride and joy. To give you the stupid-ass cliche, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened, and then remember, I don't even think it's fucking over. The ALCS streak is over, yes, and I don't know if that'll ever happen again for anybody. But this thing the Astros and how good they are, it goes forward. And how magical that run was, the ALCS run. How, like, think about it from the standpoint of your life. And why this matters, why sports matter, why the Astros matter. You got to share this with your friends, with our families, with our whole city. It brings people together. You have something to talk about. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've made to my dad over the past, especially the past 4 years, to talk about the Astros. And it gives us a chance to check in, but then also have another like commonality to discuss. That's what comes from such a great franchise. It's why people love sports as much as they do. It's not as much fun to check in with your buddies or your parents or your friends and talk about your shitty team and how bad they are. We know this because we've done it as Texans fans. It's so much more fun when they're winning, and it's been such an amazing ride. And to be mentally weak enough and emotionally weak enough to think, well, that was it. We're done. It's over. Considering all that it has given you is unacceptable to me because we got a lot out of this. We continue to get a lot out of this team and out of the ownership and out of these players. We've been so unbelievably lucky. So lucky. And we've gone through eras of our lives. All of you watching or listening have. Since 2016, when the rebuild was really coming to like fruition, going into that 2017 season, like I was a completely different person in almost every aspect of humanity in 2016 than I was in 2017. I think I had quit drinking because it was a problem for me like a few weeks before the postseason started. And then we won a World Series, and my life I was in a terrible place as a person. I was so deeply unhappy. And the Astros gave me something to root for, gave me hope and something to be happy about. And then I went through a lot from 2017 to 2019 personally, that I was able to look to this team to get me through it. Not all the way. It's not like I'm giving them full credit. I'm not an idiot, but it helped so much to have that. And I know there are a lot of people in Houston who have very similar stories. You know, you can even look to the hurricane in 2017 and how much that meant to the city on the whole, right? So all of that considered, we have something really special. And to not support it pretty blindly at this point, you should support it blindly, but especially after all the points I just made, is crazy to me. Don't give it up. There's no reason to. We're still in such a good spot. And again, just to reiterate, I do not think this is over. And I think anybody that tells you it is a bummer or an idiot. Maybe a combination of the two. But there's no need for that negativity. This is why they got Dana Brown. And really, the fucking spotlight points to him now. Is he that guy? Can he prove he should be a part of something great? Because he came in on what a lot of people were calling the tail end of this run. Can he keep it going? Can he get the job done? Does Jim Crane know what he's doing? When he hired Dana Brown, did he know what he was doing? Lots of questions going to be answered here. And that makes it exciting too. It's not like we're lacking for narratives as fans or things to care about. So there's a lot to be happy about and proud of. And a lot of the future to look forward to as Astros fans. I ask you to do that with me. This is a long show. I'm rambling. So that was it. Now we turn our focus to the Houston Texans, who are 3-1, albeit the shakiest 3-1 maybe in the history of football. But big game on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. I will obviously be back on Monday to talk about that. Please holler at me on social media. My personal accounts are at WR on Twitter and Instagram. Give me your Astros takes. Ask me questions. I love talking about this stuff. I'm more than happy to continue checking in with everybody about the Astros. And, of course, during the offseason, as big news comes out, I will cover it in some capacity. If not on social media, then here on the show, or both. I'm at WR Bolen on Twitter and Instagram. The show is at Banging the Can on TikTok, on Instagram, and Twitter. Remember, all of our episodes are available on the podcast platforms. If you want to listen in the car, on the way to work, and you're in your commute or whatever, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. We're also available on youtube.com/@bangingthecan, where you can watch in full video. I appreciate all of y'all who've been watching all season long. Subscribe so you can continue to keep up with our content during the Texans season, and Rockets season is starting up. That'll be very exciting too. We look legitimately like we should make a playoff run this year. Hopefully they don't prove me wrong, but there's most of us who pay close attention to the Rockets feel very good about where the team is at, how that rebuild has gone, and how things look for the future. Please share our show, the most unapologetic Houston sports show in existence, with your friends and family. Tell your people about us. It's the only reason we get to stick around season to season. This is my full-time job, running Bolen Media and doing podcasts, one of which is Banging the Can. I also do the Ross Bolen podcast. I also do a show called Oysters, Clams, and Cockles, where we talk about TV shows and movies sometimes. But our bread and butter is covering TV shows episodically as a companion podcast. Right now we're watching The Penguin, and we are doing a podcast for every episode of The Penguin. If you're watching The Penguin on HBO, check out Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. And if you're an F1 fan, we have Formula Bone, the finest American-made F1 content available anywhere. youtube.com/@formulabone. It's hosted by Jared J-Bone Borislow, bringing you a recap and a preview for every race all F1 season long. You got a couple more months of F1 here, pretty much goes all year. So that's Bolen Media. That's what we do. And the only reason we are able to continue doing this stuff is if we have people who support us. So I'm very thankful to everybody who's here watching and listening. Please throw us a like if you're on YouTube. Leave a comment. Like I said, definitely subscribe. If you're listening on the podcast platforms and you've got friends and family who are looking for what's the word I'm looking for? A curse word filled Houston sports experience that doesn't exist on the radio, that there aren't really a lot of people doing content like I do in terms of Houston sports, share this stuff with them, man. It means a lot to me. Thank you. I would like to keep doing it. I love doing it. When we have sponsors, support them. We haven't had any the last couple of weeks. If you have a small business or a big business in Houston and you want to sponsor our show, reach out to me on social media or at ross@bolenmedia.com, and I'll send you over to our ad sales guy and we can get something set up. That's it. Astros season done. Focus on the Texans and then the Rockets. And, of course, there's going to be a lot of action this Astros offseason, as I've said. I'm Ross Bolen. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at WRBolen. We'll be back next week. Until next time, H-Town, stay down.